Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce educational webinar series. Today, we are going to hear from Mike Sheila and Russell Smith from Advantage Industries. They're going to share some information about our holiday shopping guide and what to look for, and a sneak peek at Windows, and that's the new Windows program. So we're excited to hear from them today. So I will turn it over to Mike and Russell. Thanks so much, guys.
Ali, thank you so much for this opportunity again. We love our relationship with the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce, and we're back. It's been a couple months, so hi everybody. So glad to be back talking to chamber members again today. And I will briefly introduce my engineer extraordinaire, Mr. Russell Smith. Russell is one of our principal design engineers. He also runs our technical account management team. And he's the one that I turn to when I have a technical question from one of my clients that I don't know the answer. So I talk to Russell all the time. And today we wanted to do a couple of things that we think will be valuable to the chamber membership. We're going to talk about Windows 11 because it's a new shiny thing. And Russell and I are very fond of busting myths and addressing the truth from what's going on and giving people practical advice around when something new comes out, what's the smartest way to implement that? Because the short version is there is no one right answer. There are plenty of wrong ones, but there is no one right answer when it comes to implementing Windows 11. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Russell has a few slides for that piece. And then for the second part of our presentation, we're just going to have a little fun. Russell's going to talk about technology buying, and I'm going to fill in some of the things that I do. I am the reluctantly assigned technical guru in my family, which means anytime someone buys a computer or buys an iPad or gets Amazon Alexa, or you fill in the list of holiday tech shopping wizardry, I'm the one that they call to ask questions to. So again, Russell and I will address that from big picture. Certainly, if somebody from the audience has a specific question that they want us to answer, we'll be happy to address that as well. We're going to make this one a little less formal, a little more fun, and hopefully get you ready in time for Black Friday next week and in perpetuity for the next, call it 45 days as you do all of your holiday shopping. So with that, Russell,
sure.
Thank you. Kick us off.
Absolutely. So, I'm going to pull up a few slides here, but we've been getting obviously a lot of questions about Windows 11, which came out October 6th. So not very long ago at all. I am on it right now. I've been running a pre-release version prior to this since probably July or so. So I've been using the new operating system for several months now. I've seen it evolve actually from month to month in that time. It's a different animal than it was back in July. So it's moving very quickly. And that's going to frame some of our discussion today about the new operating system. But it is here. If you run down to a tech store, a Staples, a Best Buy, and just grab like a home machine, chances are it's going to come with Windows 11 on it. So if you're running out on Black Friday, that's what you're going to run into likely. So we do want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about it both from a home user for that holiday shopping season and from a business user perspective, because the needs of those markets are very different most of the time. And you may want to, when a business goes to Windows 11, is going to be a very different analysis of when you, an individual, goes to Windows 11.
Yeah, Russell, I want to highlight something that you just mentioned because it might have gone past our audience very quickly. Russell is running a pre-release version of Windows 11. And that's an important piece of information because, believe it or not, most of the tech companies like to test stuff before they put it out to the public. And the
I know it doesn't feel that way all the time, but really
it very rarely feels that way. But people with Russell's experience and skill set often get firsthand looks at these items. The same thing for when a new iPhone's coming out or a new tablet's coming out. they like to get the perspective of somebody technical in nature to what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Now, what they probably should do is find some non-technicals like me to say, hey, what do you think of it, Mike? Why don't you use it for a couple of months and kick the tires and
Yep.
see? So hopefully what Russell will share with you today will be much more relevant and frankly, make your holiday gift giving much less painful and much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. Let me share a screen here. I got a few things to run through. Right. Everybody able to see our PowerPoint?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, so obviously the big question is what's new with Windows 11? Short answer, not much, actually. So I think the biggest thing is there is an overhaul of the user interface, particularly the start menu. It's now in the center of the screen on Windows 11. And when you hit that little Windows logo, that square, this is what you get now here on the right. You get something like this. So it's going to have apps, and you'll notice these are pinned apps. So you can actually choose the programs that you use most often and pin them there so they're immediately available. This is for folks that maybe don't want to clutter up their desktop or they keep other stuff on their desktop, but you can just pin, hey, I use Outlook all the time, I'm going to pin it there. It will also pre-populate. So I'm not a Spotify user, but I did just upgrade this particular machine to Windows 11 a few days ago. So it's going to give me a few suggestions. Over time, the interface learns what are the programs you use most often, and it's going to pre-populate this area with here are the things you use most and the things that you specifically pinned in place. So the idea there is to make it a little faster to find those most common tools if you don't have them on your desktop or pinned to the bottom of your screen. The other thing is, wow, people ask me, where's my list of all the programs? You know, we had it in Windows 7, they took it away in Windows 8, and everybody went crazy, myself included. They put it back in Windows 10. It's still here. If you click on all apps, you will get that long column list of every program you have installed on your computer, if you want to be kind of in that Windows 7 approach. So some interface changes, things are a little more rounded. They went, Windows 7 was rounded icons, and Windows 10 was square. They've gone back to a rounded aesthetic for Windows 11, but that's a cosmetic difference. And that is mostly what you'll see. What I tell folks is, in a nutshell, it is more similar than different. This is not a sea change. This is not like when we went from 7 to 8, where they really redid everything. This is mostly an iterative improvement, I suppose, of Windows 10. I think that's the stated goal rather than reinventing everything. There are a few things that I like to mention too. One is there is better docking support as we now work in multiple locations, most of us. So I have a docking station here at the office. I have one at my house. I have different monitor configurations and different monitor resolutions. Windows 10 doesn't like making that switch. When you plug your laptop into the dock, you have to, all the windows move around, and it takes about 30 seconds to kind of snap everything back in place. It's a much faster operation on Windows 11, and it remembers your different monitor configurations and which windows were where. So when I'm at the office, it remembers that, hey, I have 2 screens. When I'm at home, it remembers I have 1 additional screen. And it's going to match the appropriate windows to where I was when I was last at that location. So that's a nice little post-COVID benefit, I think. Again, not a big change. Teams is now built into Windows, so they include Teams. They no longer include Skype. For home users, you can still download Skype, but Teams is actually built into the operating system. We use it all the time at our office. It is now the market leader by a large margin in terms of business usage for collaborative software. So they're really relying on that. They're starting to extend it into the home ecosystem as well.
And a good point to make there, Russell, is many of you may not be aware that Teams is the child of Skype. So Microsoft bought Skype about
Ages
9
ago.
years ago. And they had started integrating it to their business platform. And they rebranded it a few years ago as Teams. So if you've ever used Teams and Skype, you will notice that there are a lot of similarities to them. Most specifically, when you make a phone call, that audio that you hear is something from Skype that Teams adopted. And they took the framework of Skype and implemented it to Teams for a business pursuit. That being said, there are still plenty of people that like to use Skype for non-commercial purposes, and that's why it's still a very viable platform if you're not Zooming.
Right. Absolutely. And it's still available. It's just not pre-installed in the operating system anymore. So eventually Skype, I think, will be merged fully into Teams. It's not going to happen
I agree.
for a while yet. There's some gaming enhancements. I'm a gamer. I have been for years. I love part of it is so that keeps my tech chops up to date, because gamers tend to be on more the leading edge in terms of their hardware needs and requirements and support. So I like keeping things fresh. There's some graphic enhancements. There's basically new ways that games can load their graphics. And the nice thing there is that new games that will support this, the loading screen goes away. Basically, there's such fast access to the solid state drive on new computers that the game is seamless as you walk around the world. There's never a wait and load the next area or the next room or the next continent, whatever it is. It just happens in real time. That's probably the biggest. And I say depending on game support. So very few games can take advantage of these things yet. Every game is still going to run on Windows 10. You don't need to worry about, I'm a gamer, I need to upgrade. But there's some things coming down the pipe. The other thing is still to come. There's going to be Android app support. And this one's really interesting to me. So anything that you see in the Google Play Store should be able to run, or most versions, or have a version of it that will run on a Windows computer. So the exact same application, if you use VentuSky for weather, you can download the VentuSky Android app and run it from your computer. That is not available yet. Microsoft is still finishing testing. I suspect they're finishing security things. That's one of the things that we're very interested in Advantage about, is how do you protect the computer from the Android app ecosystem. And I think that's what Microsoft is still working on. They're a security leader. So this is very important to them. And I suspect that's why that feature is not released yet. So it's still to come. And we don't have a date for that yet. Probably sometime next year. We'll be keeping everybody abreast of that as it develops. But as you see here, there's not a lot new in terms of features for businesses anyway. There's not a lot here that's going to tell you, hey, here's a killer business reason to get a new computer. There's really not a lot for home users here to say, hey, here's a reason why I need to go from 10 to 11 at this point. So let's take a look at that. Other part of it is, will your computer run Windows 11? So Microsoft historically has been very, very forgiving of old hardware. I've got a test computer here at the office behind me that is, I think probably about 9 years old at this point. Way longer than we keep it in a normal production use, but we just use it for testing. And it runs Windows 10 just fine. Microsoft drew a line this time. So all computer to run Windows 11, there's several requirements that they need to meet. Part of this is to improve the security of the system and software running on it. So they require something called a trusted platform module. That we have had in business computers for many, many years now. So if you have a HP Enterprise's business computer, if you have a ThinkPad, if you have a Dell Latitude or an Optiplex, you've got one of these security chips on the motherboard, and they've been doing that for over a decade. Those security chips are great because they let us do things like turn on drive encryption. So your computer drive is scrambled, so that way, God forbid, you leave your laptop on the metro, the bad guy grabs that computer, they can't read anything from it. Your drive is encrypted. That chip on the motherboard and the Windows password that you enter when you log into your computer decrypts the drive. If they don't have the chip and they don't have the password, they can't get in. So it keeps you safe. So we love TPM chips. I think it's actually a really nice thing that Microsoft is asking people to do this. It's a little bit of a pain. You may not get it to work on very old computers, but it's going to keep everybody's data safer. So I'm actually a big fan of that. The other corollary to this is that Microsoft is saying you have to have a fairly recent processor, and anything probably from the last 3 to 4 years. You have to have a AMD Ryzen 2nd generation, that's a 2000 series or newer processor. So the current one is 5000 series. So we've got a few generations there. And an Intel 8th generation or newer. And the 12th generation desktop Intel chips came out last week. So basically go back, the current generation plus the previous 3 are going to support Windows 11. So any computer that you purchased probably in the last 3 or 4 years should be able to run Windows 11. Older than that probably will not be able to run it. There's a workaround, and make a note of this. For older chips, we do not recommend it because Microsoft has not promised any security support past the next few months. So if it's that old, and anyway, if the computer is 4 years old or more and you're looking at a serious upgrade, you're probably better off looking at a new computer, especially in a business sense.
So Russell, I want to ask a question here because I think it becomes very relevant for our holiday tech shopping guide that we'll be doing in the second half today.
Yeah.
But when you look at buying a computer, like you said, Intel 8th generation, for me, that's not always terribly clear. Because they'll put that little sticker on there. It says Intel inside, and there could be 100 different descriptions.
Yeah.
So if it's not overly sophisticated, would you mind giving just a couple minutes of clarity to what to look for there?
Absolutely. And Mike, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a lot of, I think, especially in retail stores, there's a lot of sort of misleading marketing, and there'll be that big sticker on the box that kind of shouts out the things that they're most excited about or they think will look most impressive, but may not be the most important. And often you'll here's I was looking at for a client an ad at Best Buy earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of drag it over here. Right here, okay, we've got an HP Pavilion. It's got an i5. Does not say what generation it is. So a couple things. One is if you're going into a retail store, they don't keep inventory that's more than a year or so old. So you're not going to see, if you walk into Staples, Office Depot, Best Buy, these places, Micro Center, you're not going to see a machine that predates this requirement in terms of the processor. You do need to be careful online, however. We had a client that, went on Amazon, bought a whole bunch of new laptops, called me up and said, hey, we're ready to set them up. And I looked at it and realized these laptops were a model, they were new, but they'd obviously been sitting in a warehouse. It was a 4-year-old model, which is almost, time to replace them in terms of the hardware speed. So retail stores tend to be safer for that because they're turning over their inventory very fast. They're not going to keep stuff. Amazon itself is probably fine, but third-party Amazon sellers, you want to be very careful. If we go back
for those Cyber Monday shoppers like me, you really do want to look in the details and see which generation that i5 is.
Now on this Best Buy, it just says i5 here. If I go down and read the spec sheet, it's going to tell me i5, zoom this in a little, 1155. So that is an 11th generation. The first two numbers
Oh, there you go.
in an Intel sequence. It's the generation of the processor. So the brand new desktop chips that came out last week start with a 12. Intel, it's always four numbers. So first number is a generation. And then the second two numbers, honestly, you don't need to worry about. There are going to be slight variations in the speed of the processor, but it's a factor of a percentage or two usually. So I focus on two things. The i5 or an AMD, it's going to be like an R5, and then that two. So the AMD equivalent would be a current AMD chip would be the R5-5600. And that's going to be the same thing. So that 5 there is going to be 5th generation AMD. And that's going to be fine. So anything older, anything beyond like a AMD Ryzen 2600, that's okay. An AMD Ryzen 1700 is not going to be okay because that's going to be a first generation chip.
So the example you just showed us, the Intel, for example, if it was a 7th generation, it would say 07.
It would actually say, yes, it would, that one would say, actually, well, they keep changing it. That one would say 7000. This is Intel's marketing people drive me insane because every generation they kind of change the rules and what's what. A 7th generation would say 7000.
Okay.
Why did they
So it
do
would say
that?
70 something.
It would say 7 zeros. 8th generation has 8 and then 000 or whatever the number is. Yeah.
So that's the thing to look for. Very good.
Yeah. So you're going to basically anything that you see in the store now, I think would either start with on the Intel side would start with a 10, 11, or 12. I would not get anything older. I would not do anything that starts with an 8 or 9 at this point. They're still technically work with Windows 11, but they're a few years old. You want to go with something newer than that. On the AMD side, you're going to want to look for anything that starts with a 4 or 5 typically. 2 or 3 will work, but again, they're getting to be a few years old now. Good question. But yeah, I'm pretty sure, especially on the Intel side, that it is this confusing purposely. That they do want to create some confusion here, and so it's
Well, if they can get rid of old
a bit of a
inventory, why
struggle.
not?
Don't feel bad. Yeah. One of the other gotchas that you want to look for in retail stores is you want to be very careful looking at the disc and the size and what type it is. So, if we go back to this HP again, we've got a 512 SSD. SSD is the thing you want to look for. That is crucial. That means it is a solid state drive. It is an array of microchips, and your computer boots, your computer accesses data at microchip speeds. What you want to avoid is an HDD or a hard drive, and that is a spinning hard drive. Like this one. Here's one that I've opened up, but if you look, it actually has a spinning platter, a disc, and there's a small magnetic needle that moves over it. This is the traditional hard drive that we've been using for decades. They are very good at storing large amounts of data,
Not so fast.
but they're not very fast. And so one of the things that I've seen going into a retail store is they'll advertise like, hey, i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte hard drive. And people at the store, I think, walking around looking, and if they see 2 machines and one says it's a 256 gigabyte drive, and the other says it's 2 terabytes or 2000, somebody who doesn't know better will say, well, and they're the same price. I'm saying, I'm going to go for the one with the bigger drive. That's 2000 instead of 256. You are going to have a much better time and experience with those 2 machines buying the one with the smaller solid state drive. It's just going to work faster. It's going to be more reliable. Your computer boots in 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes. Night and day difference. So that is one of the biggest things to beware in the retail stores. Look for that SSD. Now, Windows 11 recommends you have 64. Our experience here over the years in Advantage, what we typically deploy to clients, and what usually works well for home users, is we recommend a 256 gigabyte drive. That it's more space than you probably need, but the price difference isn't that much, and it gives you flexibility and room to grow. You're probably going to have this computer for 4 to 6 years, and just like your house, you're going to junk it up. You're going to throw things on there, and you don't want to run out of space. The only time that you really need more space than that is if you're a certain type of power user. Gamers typically need more space because games are getting very, very big. A Class A top level computer game can be 100 gigabytes or more for one game. So gamers will usually go with terabyte SSDs, for instance. Media creation folks, if you are an artist and you're doing videos or music, you may need more space to store those videos. But everybody else, the rest of the world, if you're doing photos, if you're doing internet, you're doing, Word documents, Office, 256 will give you a ton of space. You can keep a lot of music on there and everything too. So that's kind of the happy medium. RAM.
Russell, I was going to say RAM is a similar creature in that, for one, it's not remarkably more expensive to have 8 gigs versus 4 gigs. And the user experience that you will have is so much better. And again, we'll probably talk a little bit about this in the holiday tech shopping. If you look at the specs on the latest Xbox or PlayStation platform, I think they're starting at 16 gigs now, or maybe 24, because to really get that movie-like experience in the animation of the games, having that processor, having that RAM capability really does make it a much more immersive and realistic feeling process. That's what's one of the many reasons that you want the 8 gigs.
But the other corollary of that, Mike, is RAM is only helpful when you need it. If you don't need it, you can throw on all the RAM in the world and it won't make your computer faster. RAM is used, this is a good discussion. People always ask me, like, memory, we'll say, hey, you're running out of RAM, and they say, Russell, what if I delete some stuff? Guess what? It's not going to help you. The way computers work, and this has been the case for about 50 years at this point, is that the disk is where you store all your data. That's where you save your files. The disk is slower than the rest of the computer. Even with an SSD, it's still slower than the rest of the computer. RAM is very, very high speed. It's designed to be active usage. And so what happens is when you open a program or open a file, it gets copied from the disk onto the RAM while you're using it. When you close the program, it gets copied from the RAM back onto the disk. So what that means is if your computer person comes in and says, yeah, you need more RAM, deleting stuff doesn't help you because RAM is used by the programs you're actively using. So if you need more RAM, that probably means you're like me and you have a million browser tabs open all the time. You have, 15 Outlook windows open all the time. You may be running Excel and PowerPoint and my QuoteWorks database. So if I'm doing a lot of activities, I need more RAM. But if I'm only doing a few things at a time, I need less. We find a kind of happy medium is 8 gigabytes of RAM. Typically, that's what you're going to see in the store for any kind of mainstream computer these days. 16 is not going to hurt you. I run 16 here and at home because, again, I'm a power user. Anybody who is doing media creation, who's an artist, maybe a designer, or anybody who's a gamer, I'd say you probably want to be 16. A few of those people may want more than that, not many, but I'd probably say office users, 80 of them, 8 gigabytes is the perfect spot. The rest of the office users, maybe they need 16, but they would be the power users.
And with that, 8 gigs will support them for the foreseeable future. So when you're
Yes.
buying a device, what we like to do for people is say, well, we'd like this to last 36 to 48 months. And what we mean by last is perform at a very productive level for the end user, which is why Russell was saying, we would never recommend that for an employee in an architecture firm unless they're just on the administrative level.
Right.
Because for an administrator, that 8 gigs will perform very well. But so when we talk about those specs, and this is a very nerdy panel.
This is my nerdiest slide, I think.
Yeah, this is very nerdy.
Apologies.
And we recognize that this can be a little overwhelming. And anybody that has a general question, you can certainly reach out to Russell and I, or you can use our email, which is answers@getadvantage.com. And we'll literally give you that. You can ask us anything. And we're not going to put you on the clock. We're not going to send you a bill. We're going to answer your question. And, if it's something related to holiday gift giving or something you want to do personally or professionally, feel free to use that. And there's no strings attached to that, because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to ask Russell, hey, what should I tell this person? So one of my engineers is going to address it for you.
Oops. Yep, here we go. So you can screenshot this. Well, obviously, Ali's going to put it up. This is what to look for in a very quick nutshell. If you are going shopping, you're going to look for 10 or 11 as the operating system. You're going to look for an AMD Ryzen R3 or i5 or an Intel i3 or i5. In our experience, we found that lower than that, so the AMD Athlons or the Intel Pentiums or Celerons, to Mike's point, they're not going to last you that long. It may be good enough for now, but you're going to start feeling that that's a little bit underpowered in a couple of years. And we want you to get 4 to 6 years out of it. So going for the middle of the market is the best kind of value per dollar. And that's why we like those 3 or 5 series chips. 7s are great. Again, it's not going to hurt you. It's a little bit faster, but most people won't take advantage of that extra horsepower. It's like a sports car. Unless you are doing something that needs a sports car. If you're just driving back and forth to the office, yeah, it's great to have, but it's not going to help you get to the office faster unless you're violating a few traffic laws. So that's kind of how I like to think about the 7, the 9 CPUs. Unless you're a gamer, unless you're a designer or an artist, you can skip those. It's not going to hurt anything, but it's not worth the extra expense. RAM, again, 8 gigabytes is great for most people, 16 for power users. SSDs, 256 for most people, 512 or more for power users. And then graphics cards, Intel and AMD both have graphics on the CPU, which are fine for 90% of us. Again, the people would be gamers, designers, artists, CAD users. And then you'd get a separate graphics card from AMD or NVIDIA. So this is the short list of what to look for. If you get a machine that does these things, that has these specs, that's going to be a good machine that's going to last you for several years. So just keeping it simple. That's this one. Okay, an extra slide here. Okay, so how much does Windows 11 cost? Good news is if you're on Windows 10, nothing. And so one of the things that I want to tell folks right now is if you just bought a Windows 10 computer in the last 2 years, if you picked one up last week, or if you pick one up during Black Friday, you should not let the fact that it has Windows 10 prevent you from buying the computer. It is a free upgrade. It will continue to be a free upgrade. If you're buying it, because maybe you're building a computer for the first time, if you're a nerd like me, it's going to cost you $130 for the home edition and $170 for the business edition. And Mike and I like to talk about the pro version of Windows, the business one. And I say required for business for a reason. Pro, and this is the same with Windows 10 and Windows 7 even, has several tools for computer management and security administration that businesses require. So Pro has connections that let your organization manage the health and safety and security of those computers. Windows 10 Home Edition or Windows 11 Home Edition doesn't have those connectors, can't be managed by the business. Security rules can't be enforced on home computers the same way they can. So if you're buying for work, always go with the Pro Edition. There is the only brick and mortar store in our market that sells Pro computers is Micro Center. Otherwise, you're going to have to order them. And that would be normally through somebody like Dell or Lenovo. And here's a big one. Should I move? Well, we saw the features, which isn't really adding a ton. It's a new user interface and some little bit of quality of life stuff. So would we reason? And I put somebody who I think has no need to upgrade. That's a classic Mac and a dot matrix printer on here. But you're probably going to, if you run out to Best Buy, next week for Black Friday, you're probably going to get a Windows 11 machine. Again, they turn over their inventory so fast that a lot of the Windows 10 computers have already disappeared from stores. So that's what it is. Congratulations. Again, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be more similar than different to Windows 10. It took me very little time to adjust everything. I was able to find it very intuitively. System stability usually isn't as paramount a concern for home users as it is for business. So I told you at the start of the talk that I've been using Windows 11 since July or so, and I've seen changes every month. They're always after an operating system is released. There are little bugs to work out, there are things to fix, there are improvements to make. As you saw, Microsoft still hasn't added the Android app support, so they're actively working on adding features right now and fixing things. If you're a home user and you have a glitch or a crash, it's annoying. It's usually not a huge problem, and you wait a second and it fixes itself, or you reboot the computer and it fixes itself. So businesses, the productivity is a lot more paramount and stability is more of the focus. Home users kind of dive in and get used to it, I say. The other part is Windows 10 is under support by Microsoft until at least October of 2025. So
You've got some time.
You've got lots of time. That's 4 years from now. Chances are, normal lifespan of computers 4 to 6 years, you're probably going to replace that computer rather than upgrade it. And I would say, all things being equal, that's the way to go. There's no need to upgrade unless you have a special feature that you're needing. And again, we haven't identified a lot of those yet. It's probably worth not bothering and just save yourself the time and don't even worry about it. Just replace your computer before October of 2025 in that case, or do the upgrade. For organizations, there's a little bit of a difference. So one is, big OEMs like Dell, HP, Lenovo, they recognize that corporations are more interested in stability than new features or performance in most cases. Obviously, like design firms may be an exception to that, but your accounting firm, they don't need a new feature. They just want the computer to work. And so OEMs recognize that. So business machines are going to come with Windows for at least a year, Windows 10 for at least a year. They're going to, in a few months, start having more Windows 11 machines available, but I actually can't buy a Dell Latitude, for instance, with Windows 11 in most cases, because Dell is actually running through stability testing on those systems still. And you'll see that with like Lenovo and HP, that they spend extra time testing business computers with the new operating system to make sure it is in fact as stable as it can be. And we won't see that start showing up for probably another month or two.
Now, for those of you that don't speak fluid nerd like Russell and I, OEM is original equipment manufacturer.
Mhm.
So when you buy, you probably see that term thrown around when you're doing shopping for car parts. You see that a lot. Getting an OEM part for your car.
They always
So
cost
original equipment
more.
manufacturer.
And they always cost more, right, than the one you get off Amazon. But the reason is that they are doing a lot of testing. Same with the car part, so GM is really evaluating, and this is made to their specifications. So you're paying a little more, but it's going to Same with the computers. And so we've advised our clients we advise them to wait for 3 months before they looked at buying new Windows 11 computers. That would be January. And again, that's giving 3 months of home users and people like me to kind of test out, use the operating system, give feedback to Microsoft, Dell, any bugs we find or issues we find. In practicality, I don't see a lot at this point. Seems to work very well, but there's several significant fixes as recently as 2 weeks ago. So kind of let the home users be the guinea pig. You don't need that at your office yet. Upgrading computers, in our experience, we want to wait a little bit longer. We probably want to wait 6 months. And the reason why is, Dell is probably not going to go back to a computer from 2 years ago and test it with Windows 7 with the same rigorous testing they do on a brand new model. So that model hasn't been specifically tested with Windows 11. So again, let's give a little bit of extra time for Microsoft, Dell, HP to work out any bugs and get those resolved. So we wouldn't recommend that until April. And because Windows 10 is supported so long, unless you bought that computer in the last year or two for a business, we're probably recommending never upgrading. It's probably not worth it, and you're better off buying that new computer. All right, we looked at our specs, and then got some kind of general tips, and then we'll open it up to questions and stuff. So,
Yeah, I've got a great hypothetical for you, which is not hypothetical.
Beautiful. A couple things I want to leave people with is, yes, the global supply chain shortage is real, and it has really hit the tech sector very badly. The processor chips have been tremendously backordered. Demand went through the roof when people went home. That's why you can't buy a new car easily, because like Honda doesn't have chips to put in the navigation systems and things like that. So there is a lot of back ordering. The big companies like Dell do tend to get chips somewhat regularly. But I tell folks, if you think you need to buy something, do it sooner. Things can be very back ordered. Network switches, for instance, we're seeing 3 months lead time on those right now from any manufacturer. Doesn't matter who we go to. So if you know what you want to get, hop on and get it today. One of the things I also want to tell folks is check the manufacturer suggested retail pricing. There are some items that are very high demand right now, and there are unscrupulous third-party resellers really gouging prices. So a graphics card, if you're a gamer, is a very good example of this. A graphics card that may normally retail or have a suggested retail price of $350 can be selling for $1,000 right now. And I really want a new graphics card, and I can't do that. I just can't stomach it. So, that may be the kind of thing where you say, hey, it may be better to wait. Any good site, it'll show the MSRP right there and show their price, or you can then Google the product and find that out. So that's not to say don't buy it, just be informed and be mentally okay with paying that premium if you need the item right now. Purchase. The other corollary that goes with this supply chain shortage is you need to be a little more careful who you're buying from. There are a lot of supplies. There's a lot of supply shortages. There are a lot of demand spikes. There are a lot of people trying to take advantage of the current market. I mentioned a client who recently bought computers that turned out to be 4 years old. And that was definitely taking advantage of this kind of thing where it was hard to find computers. These people can hook you up great. But that was a third party on Amazon in that case. So be careful. Try to go direct if you're using Amazon, or very carefully verify that third party. Also make sure it's not a remanufactured item unless you're looking for that. There are a lot of things right now like network switches where it's very hard to get a new one, or you're going to have to pay 3 times as much. So a lot of people selling used or remanufactured items at the normal retail price. And I think partially to trick people and think, oh, great, here it is. It's normally $350. Here it is, great. And then you find out, well, it's been used.
And while this is not directly stated, you probably want to stay away from things like Facebook Marketplace and eBay for your tech holiday purchases.
Right.
So if you're finding the latest Squishmallow, or you're finding the latest pair of shoes or the latest book, eBay, Amazon, Facebook Marketplace are all great for that. But when it comes to tech, just say no.
One of my favorite places, when I tell my family where to buy a computer, Costco is a really good place because they have a 90-day return policy. Doesn't matter the reason, and they double the warranty on all the computers and electronics they sell. So you buy a TV or a laptop from there, instead of a 1-year warranty, you get a 2. They also provide phone support for as long as you own that device. So you could call them up in 5 years with a problem with your TV you bought there, and they will try to help you with it. And that's nice. There are a couple other stores that have that, but you look for those kinds of things. The last part is, this is an important one. If you're doing the smart home thing, you're doing Alexa or Google Voice or Apple's ecosystem, know your ecosystem, and when you're buying that product, make sure it's compatible. Why that's important is there really should be a standard. You should be able to go buy a speaker that works with every major platform, and it shouldn't matter. And you should actually be able to say to the speaker, "Okay, Google and Alexa," and it would reply to either using the appropriate service. However, the big 3 there, Apple, Google, Amazon, Apple and Google in particular, do not like to license products that have been licensed for one of the other 2 companies. They really prefer not to. So it's very hard in a lot of cases to find a product that will work with every ecosystem. So if you're looking for that smart home thing, if you're looking for that voice command thing, do read the specs and reviews very carefully to make sure it works with the platform you're already on. That's a big one that burns a lot of people.
Yeah. So Russell, that's a great segue into the not so hypothetical example I'm going to give you. So I am a husband. I am a father. I have a 20-year-old daughter who is a sophomore in college. I have a 16-year-old son who's a junior in high school. In addition to that, I have an 8-year-old niece. I have twin 6-year-old niece and nephew. And then I have a couple wee ones as well. I have a 2-year-old niece and I have a year-old nephew. So I'm going to touch all the technology spectrum with that conversation. And in addition to that, my daughter has a Mac. My family all have iPhones. We use Amazon Alexa for television viewing. We have Google Nest for our Wi-Fi. And I'm using a Windows machine right now. So as you can see, I'm quite the hodgepodge of technology in my home. And I'm guessing a lot of our audience is the same way. So if you have any thoughts or general practices that you want to, after you say shame on me, Michael, for Frankensteining my technology in my home together like that, what are some other thoughts that you would share with somebody in a similar environment?
Well, first off, Mike, don't blame yourself, because the pace that this sort of Internet of Things has come to the house has been very quick. Most of us have just started, adding these things to our homes in the last few years, and the technology is changing so quickly that what it can do and what makes sense, you may say, 3 years ago, you said, yeah, I'm going to be on Amazon. And, as it turns out, because, where your daughter goes to school or whatever, maybe all of a sudden you're discover boy, well, now I'm really more a Mac house, but I still have this Amazon equipment. And you're not the only person in that boat. And like I said, unfortunately, they don't make it easy for us to kind of make that shift. And unfortunately, probably a lot of times the best advice I can folks is, if you want it to all be seamless, you're probably going to have to replace some of your gear. If you want everything,
if you're willing to put up with a little inconsistency, then keeping things
then
the
you
way
can,
they are will probably
right,
serve.
if it works, make it work. Yeah. The other thing is, I do get folks ask about privacy concerns. And, so I do want to mention that all of these companies have privacy policies. However, all of these companies have been caught, or there have been hacks where, right, somebody's smart speaker is recording them when they're not talking, because it is listening all the time.
And it
so,
has to, because it has to pick out Siri, or it has
Right.
to pick out Alexa, or it has to pick out Google in order to know to pay attention.
Exactly. So it's one of the things that I want to tell folks, you have to be aware of, that this does add some risk, and I think it's minimal. But you should be okay with the fact that, yes, Google or Amazon or Apple is listening to you all the time, and you're relying on them to protect that data.
Now, the
Now,
other side
that
of
said,
that,
if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, they also know where you are at all times, which is part of it. And again, you're relying on them to sort of protect that data. But it
and
is
the other
something
side of that, to let people know, is if you say, I don't want that in my house, that does not make you automatically the grumpy old man or the grumpy old woman saying, get off my lawn. That is a perfectly reasonable and acceptable stance to take.
Yeah,
So don't let other
I
family members bully you if they're
I confess that I use it in the car. I don't use it in the house. So there you go. There you go. So yeah, I guess I'm a curmudgeon too.
But it is convenient. We have thermostats that are controlled by my phone. We have lights that are controlled by my phone, that I can turn on. I can be in Ireland and adjust the lights in my house.
Yep.
I have Alexa and I have Google and I have other things that the thing that freaks me out is I can be talking to somebody about a football jersey and say, gosh, I really want to get my son a football jersey for Hanukkah, for Christmas, for Kwanzaa, for whatever. And then I look at my Facebook and it's all football jerseys and where I can buy them and where I can get them cheap. And I that shocks me. And it's not just that, it's products usually. If Carla and I are talking about where to get, some kind of a product for she makes a delicious sweet potato pie. If we were talking about products for that, I wouldn't be shocked to look down and see something on my, an ad for yams, for cinnamon, for something. Maybe that's a little bit smaller, but the thing that freaked me out were the football jerseys. I didn't look it up online, and it found it. We talked about it. So, and now I can't get off of it. And I bought one of the owl things, which is great for our boardroom. It's terrific. And I did probably, I'm sure I looked that up to purchase it, but now I cannot get away from the ads that I'm getting for it. I can click on and say, I've already purchased, please stop sending me, hide this, and they still come.
Yeah.
So I get it. Like we've all talked
that is
about
the
it.
unfortunate evolution, Ali. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, but one thing that you said, Mike, that's interesting is that you can control your television through Google. Is that through?
So I have an Amazon Alexa Cube,
Okay.
which I absolutely love.
Yep.
And it's literally, it's a box about this big, and it directly connects to the internet in my home. And it's like a mini computer. It just has one job. So it holds all of my television apps, and it holds all of my data for historical. But if I want to watch YouTube TV, I say, Alexa, turn on the TV. And I say, Alexa, I want to watch The Good Doctor on CBS, and it'll pull up my YouTube TV app. Or I can say, I want to watch The Golden Girls on Hulu. I say that because my wife loves The Golden Girls.
Yeah.
Hulu's the channel that's carrying right now. Or I can say, I want to watch The Witcher on Netflix, and it'll pull that up for me because I'm a subscriber. I could say, I want to watch The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, and it'll pull that up for me. So I love, now again, I'm kind of a techie nerdy guy. So I love that aspect. And Apple TV has similar properties baked into it. And there's Roku, and there's probably 100 of them. Yeah. I'm an unabashed Amazon nerd. So I use Prime all the time. I do 90% of my Christmas shopping there. And I embraced the Alexa product line very early on. So that's one of the many ways that you can infuse a little tech into your home entertainment.
If past experience is any indicator, at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, I think the European Union is probably going to enforce some kind of standardization for
Right.
devices.
That's
and say that
excellent.
everybody needs to be openly compatible. That is historically what they've done. I wish we did it in the US. We're not as motivated, I think, in that kind of open standard thing as they are. But a very recent example was, the ordinary, USB-C cable, which most phones, now use. European Union earlier this summer said that all devices need to be charged through a USB-C cable. So you cannot have your own little cable. Apple can't have their own special iPhone cable. Everything sold in the EU has to use a universal standard, which means that, it's all beneficial. If your laptop charger dies, you buy any laptop charger. If your phone charger dies, you buy any phone charger. You plug it in any computer. And so I think this will probably be coming eventually for this home Internet of Things marketplace. Probably can't come soon enough. But as I said, it's been evolving so quickly that there's always a lag in sort of between legislation and regulation. Consumer protection side.
That's interesting. My son just bought a new an iPhone, the newest one, the 13 Pro or something, over the weekend. He saved up money. He wanted to buy it flat out, so I didn't, track him wherever he was going. And so, but what he was saying is, I've got this great phone, and on his, he has a little battery thing on the back, not a battery, but a magnet. And he said to me, he goes, I'll bet you in a few years you won't plug anything in. You'll just set it down to charge.
Yeah, they're moving towards that now. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it'll charge it in 5 minutes. It'll be fully charged, and off you go. Similar to my watch, that I don't plug anything in. I just set it on a little round thing. But even his cover that he got had a little round magnet thing, and he just sets it down. Like I have in my office, I have a little stand thing.
Charge pad.
Yeah. And I just lean my phone up against it, and it charges.
Yep.
Most phones will do that now, but you're absolutely right. They're moving towards why do we need wires on the go?
That was actually also part of the EU standard that was passed this summer, is that they had to support a standardized wireless charging for the car.
Right. And then the other part, he opened the box and he said, they did give him the charger, but there's no plug anymore, and there are no headphones.
Yep.
So he's like, where's that? And I said, well, guess what they sell? They sell earbuds. They don't want you to have a wire because they can get $130 out of you for the earbuds. So they don't even have a spot to put them in anymore.
And with that, people have very specific goals when they use an earpiece.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I have a pair of noise canceling Bose headphones that Bluetooth, and I have used them for years, and I love them.
Yep.
With that, I also have round the ear Beats, and I use those for when I'm exercising because they're water resistant and they don't cancel noise as much, so I can be more aware of things going on around me while I'm walking and talking. My wife and my daughter both have AirPods, and they absolutely love them. They wouldn't go a day without them. So the customer experience, the end user experience, has gotten so highly specialized that while some people are bummed out they're not getting their free wired earbuds anymore, the consensus is most of them actually don't care. It's a much smaller percentage of the marketplace. It's like, darn, I was hoping to get my new earbuds this time.
Yeah, exactly. And then they throw them in a drawer because they're using their Beats and their buds and everything else.
Right.
I have mine, which I love. I can't use them on a Zoom call or a Teams call or a conference call because every time an email comes in, these shut off completely or our phones are connected to the, maybe we'll talk about that offline, but our phones are
Yeah,
connected
there are
to-
some tweaks you can make that to be a much better experience for certain.
Yeah, because it all of a sudden it goes silent for up to 5 full seconds until I can put myself on do not disturb, or so I can't hear anything. And with these, I don't have that issue because I'm hardwired into a Lenovo.
Well, that's one of our that's one of our aphorisms at Advantage is that, you know, people are like, oh, can I just do my whole office wireless on the computers? And we're like, wired is always more reliable.
Yeah,
It's always more reliable. It just
Yeah.
works.
The answer
Like
is
turning
yes,
on the
you
lights.
can, but
yeah.
Same with
the
the
answer is
tech.
almost always yes, you can, but.
Yep. Wireless is cool, but if you need reliability, wired's the way to go.
Yeah. I think
Well,
you
hey,
guys have
Russell,
all seen me
today
duck
has
training.
been a whole bunch of fun. I enjoyed this conversation today. And Allie and the rest of the wonderful people at the chamber, and to our chamber members that joined us today, thank you all so much for your time. We hope you have a fantastic holiday season. See family, you know, eat your meal of choice, because everybody's got something specific going on over the holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And like Mike said, if you're doing your shopping and you have any questions for us, send it in. We're happy to.
Answers at getadvantage.com. We are happy to answer everything from the sublime to the ridiculous and everything in between.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And again, on behalf of the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce, we thank you all for joining us for the monthly webinar series, education webinar series. Mike, Russell, happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful holiday with friends and family. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon.
You as well.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.